some pro football today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. You know how we like to love to close out a Sunday night football matchup. We had the Niners taking on the Bills. Bills looking extraordinary regardless of the weather conditions, coming out on top 35-10. Big game for the Bills also because they clinched their 5th consecutive AFC title. Can they continue to prevail forward, or will they be stood up yet again by another AFC rival that just loves to take their opportunities away from them? But don't leave it to me to unpack this one. Let's talk with Tom Vecchio and see what he made of the game, because it's always weird when I don't get to talk to you during halftime, Tom, to get your opinion on things. It was kind of a slow start. The snow started coming in really heavy and pretty crazy, and then commentators were talking about it being more of, a strength and impact and power game versus speed, even though Cook was just ridiculous and speedy in the snow regardless. So what did you make of this matchup? Let's start with the first half.
First half was certainly a little slow. Josh Allen is Superman, or at least like Clark Kent, at least a version of Superman, like doing literally everything. He's throwing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, he's catching laterals and scoring touchdowns. So the Bills look great. I think it's clear that they knew what the game plan had to be coming in. And like looking at the box score, you want to say like I always say, like, we want context when it comes to the box score, but like Josh Allen, 13 of 17 for 148. They had over 100 yards on the ground with James Cook, and then another 60 plus yards from Ray Davis, where it's like the game plan was Josh Allen, be safe with the ball. They can control things on the ground, and he makes passes when he needs to. He doesn't need to throw the ball 35 times. And this is partly due to the weather, or I'd say mainly due to the weather. They knew what they had to do, and they just executed that to the T. And granted, the 49ers, McCaffrey gets hurt. They just haven't looked good overall as a team, but they controlled every part of this game, the offense, the defense. You want to throw in special teams, do so. It was all Bills. They look great, and I'm going to call it right now, the 49ers season is over. It is. With this loss today, combined with the Rams winning and the Seahawks winning and just where things sit in the NFC, their season is done.
Yeah, there's a number of teams in the NFC that are pulling off strong wins and continuing to stack on top of it, while the Niners still have too many things to figure out. Not to mention is that, of course, injuries suck, but Brock Purdy's banged up. Christian McCaffrey looked completely deflated when he went down earlier. Then you got Warner, who was pushing through his own discomfort, even though he came back into the game. There's just too many question marks when it comes to the Niners, and they dropped another win today. I mean, they were sitting 5-6 heading into this matchup. That's a terrible record trying to compete when it comes to some teams thriving in the NFC. Before we break down the NFC, though, let's stick with the Bills for just a second, because we saw an Allen to Amari to an Allen touchdown. Then we saw all kinds of creativity coming from this Bills team. And then when you're looking at futures, I know there's so many people that are kind of reserved in terms of can the Bills continue to prevail forward. But what would you make of this performance, and what would it say when it comes to what the Bills could potentially do? Or can we see them go deeper in the postseason than when they typically get stood up?
When it comes to the AFC, I think my prevailing thought for the years, everyone always makes the jokes we want to fast forward to the AFC Championship game. And, this year, I want to say I'm going to put the Bills in a tier of their own. I think the Bills are the best team in the AFC. And then after it, I'm going to put the Chiefs and then the Ravens. And granted, we've seen varying things from both of these teams where the Chiefs, just on Friday, the game that we did, it's they're winning, but it's super, super ugly. Last week, they need a field goal to beat the Panthers when they're 10-point road favorites. They're not covering against the Raiders. And then the Ravens looked bad today. They did not look good against a very good Eagles team. So home field for the Bills, I got to say, is huge for them. And granted, it's not like the weather won't be great in Kansas City or Baltimore once we get to January or whatever. But I think just the way the Bills play at home, they want to be there. So securing the number 1 seed, they have the tiebreaker over the Chiefs because of the win. I think that is their absolute number 1 priority right now. And then everything goes after that. I think the Chiefs will be playing on the road, maybe against Buffalo, maybe against the Ravens, whatever it might be. But Bills securing home field and the number 1 seed is their most important goal right now.
Big time, and they showed complete command of being at home field and then playing in the snow on top of it. You guys know I'm still getting acclimated to this cold, but that actually looked pretty exciting. One thing that I love about our conversations, Tom, we always figure out how to gauge things moving forward after these games. And then we saw James Cook have a massive game. We also saw him pick up a couple passes as well. But then more importantly, Dawson Knox led when it comes to receiving those big plays between the tight end and Josh Allen. So does this change anything for you when it comes to gauging props for this Bills team? Does anything feel more solidified, or is it still just kind of we'll see as we go?
Yeah, I think it is. We'll see as we go. Obviously, the pass volume overall from Josh Allen was low again, just largely due to the weather. They're still without Kincaid, and they are still without Keon Coleman, the rookie wide receiver. So, like, we see Cook have a massive game and a little bit lower passing volume overall. We're seeing the main players be involved, like Khalil Shakir has been like a staple in their offense overall. But, once we get Keon Coleman back and Dalton Kincaid back, I expect it to be Khalil Shakir, Amari Cooper, Dalton Kincaid, and then Keon Coleman, maybe in that order, where we're not going to see Matt Collins. Like, Matt Collins wouldn't be an option to catch touchdowns because if they're fully healthy, there's going to be 4 legit awesome pass catchers ahead of them, plus Ray Davis and James Cook in the backfield. So today, I think we can say, like, it's a good thing that the Bills have such depth and they have a well-rounded offense. But ultimately, once those players come back, that's who really should be seeing the ball.
Yeah. How'd your plays round out for this matchup? Because I did jump on Knox in the second half, pick up over 40.5. And like I said, led 56 receiving yards. I did also take Josh Allen for 21 rushing yards. But what did you go in with?
I had James Cook over 14.5 carries. He ended with 14, so that's a loss there. But I had a larger play on under 46, a little bit of an alt line. So that came through the win. I'm all happy. I'll take one small loss there, and I'll win the war but lose the battle, I guess, as they say.
I know, but that was a big adjustment. That was so wise of you because there were still so many people. I mean, the first half just indicated and screamed the under total because of what we were seeing. And there were people that were talking about, like, there's no way that this is 44.5. So instinct, I don't trust unders, especially not this season, but don't go anywhere. Tom and I continue to unpack this game as well. This recap all of the excitement today. We had a 300-pound lineman make it into the end zone as well. So much to get into here on Pro Football Today. It's the post game. Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Fillet Indiana. They would smash them. Honestly.
You listen to yourself speak. That's not a reality question. They have not played each other. You are using hypothetical.
And they got embarrassed.
As so many
if
teams
they would have
do.
won that football, yes, that's you're 100%
but that's the thing,
correct.
No.
The
Stop.
only argument is Indiana is a decent football team and a product of their environment.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio, running through the Sunday night football matchup between the Niners and the Bills. And in case you missed it, but how could you? 35-10 is the victory for the Bills, claiming their 5th consecutive AFC title and looking strong and looking oh so good. Josh Allen closes out with 148 through the air, but let me tell you this, considering what the snow was looking like, and I could be exaggerating a little bit because you guys know the winter and me don't get along, 148 is tremendous. No one thought we were going to see as many passes. And then Dawson Knox being one of the heroes for the Bills as well, 56 receiving yards, Shakir with 30, and then so on and so forth. The number of targets getting involved to help them get down the field. But
I'm going to jump in real quick.
Jump in.
Real quick. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Adam Schefter literally just tweeted as we were coming back from break that Kyle Shanahan said that Christian McCaffrey suffered a potential season-ending PCL injury.
You're kidding.
So Schefter literally just tweeted it a minute ago. So with the injuries that he had, we got to assume that McCaffrey's done for the year. There's absolutely no reason to bring him back. The 49ers season is over. It's going to be the Jordan Mason and Isaac Orendo show in the backfield for the 49ers.
Wow. I'm telling you, you saw it, Tom. Like, as soon as he got up and got over to the sideline, it was all over his face that, like, this was significant, potentially a wrap for him. And then walking down the tunnel, it just completely confirmed all of it. So that stinks for the 49ers. But again, I mean, injuries have just been against them all season long. We haven't particularly seen a fully healthy roster since, week 2, week 3, tops?
Yeah, I mean, McCaffrey wasn't even back until a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to judge it by that, and then by that point, Brandon Ayuk was already done for the season. So at no point were they fully healthy. And it has been a tough year for a team that was in the Super Bowl last year.
Oh, yeah. Well, they say, I mean, I know they didn't mean the slump in this sense, but they say the post-Super Bowl to the person who did not get the win, things looked significantly different in the season, and unfortunately this is impacting them in a number of ways. And if you don't have a healthy quarterback, that's just going to ruin everything also. So you said it beforehand, it's a wrap for the Niners in this season. They now fall to 5-7, came into this matchup 5-6. The best way to continue gauging this is, as you mentioned, looking at Mason. We saw Debo with some late involvement. We saw some drops from George Kittle, but again, the weather just being wild. But it just seems like there's such a disconnect out there. Before we pivot, because this does bring me to a number of questions, we got to talk about the NFC. But any final thoughts on this 35-10 matchup and what we saw out of the Bills tonight?
If you have a Bills future, I don't know if, people bet on to win the number 1 seed or whatever it might be, but coupled with a Ravens loss today, you got to be feeling confident if you're a Bills backer, whether it be Super Bowl, whether it be conference, whatever it might be. You got to be confident in that. I think we're getting to the point in the season where a lot of people may start taking positions on direct matchups, like direct Super Bowl matchups, not necessarily one team to beat another team, but like Bills to play the Lions in the Super Bowl, which I find super interesting. So I think we're getting to that point where you can start to feel more confident in a Lions bet, in a Bills bet. And I think tonight's game really showed that. I do think the Bills have overcome and have been able to learn from some of their losses over the past few years in the postseason, whatever it might be, and are ready to take that next step.
Yeah, I would second that, especially because in the first couple of weeks of the season, you saw some games where they looked shaky in first halves, but mentally they stayed at it. Coaching got them through it. They made the proper adjustments and they stayed so composed. The leadership and composure has shown a lot, and I think that's why they took a large step to come before even the middle of this NFL season, regardless. So we talked about, you brought it up, Ravens losing today, which means we got to talk about the Eagles beating the Ravens 24-19 and what that for the NFC, because they're tied 10-2 with the Vikings, who pulled off a really weird win. But who's going to challenge the Lions? Is there a team that can do so, or are the Lions just going to continue, like you said, the class act of the NFL? Any initial thoughts before we start unpacking it on the other side?
Yeah, I truly believe that it's going to be Lions versus Eagles in the NFC Championship. I think it'll be at Ford Field. I think Lions will have home field advantage. I think that's what it comes down to. When push comes to shove, I'm just going to take these teams time and time again. The Vikings have shown some clear spots where I'm truly worried. Like when they went on the road a couple of weeks ago to Jacksonville, and then they really struggled. He also struggled against the Cardinals today. I just think that the Eagles and the Lions are a step above everyone, and the Lions are a half step above the Eagles as of now. It could change in the last few weeks, but right now I'll take the Lions like 1A to the Eagles 1B.
100%. And I will say the Eagles still don't have everybody who could probably actively participate in this regular season. And so we're going to get into this Sunday slate and more on the other side of this quick break.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With two former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Fillet Indiana. They would smash them.
What?
Honestly.
Do you listen to yourself speak? That's not a reality question. They have not played each other. You are using hypothetical.
And they got embarrassed.
So many
if
teams
they
do.
Won that football. Yes, that's you're
but that's the thing, guys. No.
The only argument is Indiana is a decent football team and a product of their environment.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's madness. It's just such madness. Welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid. We're talking about Sunday Night Football. We got the Bills that come out on top of the Niners, but we moved ahead because we got to recap some of these exciting games of the day. We got to see if anything moves because now we're getting close to the close of the regular season and then starting to look ahead into that postseason. NFC's got some shakeups going on. I love the way that Tom puts this. You got the Lions that are the class of the NFL. Nobody could go against that. But you got the Eagles who caught some heat after their performance in Brazil, and then things were up and down, but injuries were impactful to them as well. I mean, it's kind of been the theme for a lot of teams. Outside of that, though, we're starting to see them put together a lot of complete football, and their roster still has not returned to full health per se. So what did you make of the Eagles' performance today, besting the Ravens 24-19? Jalen Hurts 118 through the air, but Saquon Barkley continues to be that 100-pound guy on the ground no matter what.
I would say it's great stuff overall from the Eagles where, Saquon does this thing. I think the defense played great today. They gave up a late touchdown, so, it really could have been 24-12, to note. And, a lot of people are going to, look at the box score and see, it's a pretty modest game, all things considered from Hurts. Not flashy numbers, but ultimately it didn't have to be because the defense played so well, because Saquon was doing his thing. And this is something that we should have expected with Devonta Smith, who was out today. They probably weren't going to go a super pass-heavy game with just A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. That wasn't the path to them winning. The path to them winning was hurt, kind of like for the Bills tonight, where Hurts plays a controlled game. They move the ball effectively. They give the ball to Saquon, and then they take shots to A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. We saw Dallas Goedert score a touchdown. Like, they have a controlled offense. And, once Devonta Smith comes back, maybe that's when they air it out a bit more, but they don't need to do that. And I think this is what we've seen, like, from Sirianni and the Eagles and Hurts over the past few years. It's like just do what is the best plan for that game. And sometimes it's different game to game. And today was running the ball and defense, and they did all of that great. And granted, Tucker missed a bunch of field goals on the other sides of the score. Could have been a little bit different. But ultimately, their defense showed up when they needed to, and they stopped them from getting into the red zone. They stopped them once they got over midfield, wherever it might be. And I think they played great today. I think the defense was like the key part of the Eagles game.
I will ask this question. I'm trying to get the bias out of my brain, so bear with me, Tom. Are the Eagles looking like the most complete team in the NFC outside of the Lions?
They have to be. I think they have to be, especially from a defensive standpoint and probably from a health standpoint as well, where like the Lions are starting to pick up some injuries on defense, especially. Starting to pick up a few injuries. They started signing some players onto their practice squad. So outside of that, I'd have to say the Eagles. Yeah.
All right, we'll go with the Eagles. Another team that you mentioned when we were talking about the Niners season being, over, and then the news that you broke on Christian McCaffrey likely being out for the remainder of the season. You got the Rams 21-14 over the Saints today. Stafford 183 through the air. Williams on the ground with 104. Puka Nacua just continuing to be such a staple. 5 receptions for 56 yards and found the end zone. Did you have him for a tutty today, Tom?
I did not. Not him. I was on Puka for a touchdown today, but
all right.
No Kyron Williams.
What are we making of the Rams? Are they kind of keeping some hopes alive here, or is this just something where they dropped a few too many?
I think it's doable for the Rams to make the playoffs, especially when we're looking at their next stretch of games are really tough. And that's what it comes down to. They play the Bills, the 49ers, the Jets, Cardinals, and Seahawks to close the season. So it is absolutely not easy. Like, the 49ers are not going to roll over. They're still going to play tough in a divisional matchup. It comes down to what the rest of the division does, what the rest of the league does when it comes to the playoffs overall, because where they're sitting right now at 10th, they need the Cardinals, the Bucks, and the Commanders to all lose. And I think the Commanders still have a game versus the Giants left, which I think we could count as a win, or they have 2 games against the Giants already done. They have to play the Saints, the Eagles, and the Falcons, and the Cowboys. So they just need help. Like, I think they're in the right spot, but even if they do everything perfectly, things may not fall their way just because they need so much help to pick up losses by other teams, and I'm not sure if that's the case.
Yeah, and I honestly, I couldn't agree more. And that schedule is going to be a bit tough for them, seeing as how sometimes they can't piece it all together, and it becomes a little obvious on who they're relying on to get the job done, which going against some of the defenses they got coming up can be a bit scary. We talked about the Vikings briefly, but they do get that narrow escape, 23-22 over the Cardinals. Was this a game that said that the Vikings were capable of getting back in the win column completely, or was this just something that the Cardinals happened to drop? Because this game was kind of ugly in a number of ways.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a bit of both. Like, it's good that, like, the Vikings showed the resilience that they fell behind and they come back, storming in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, and they have this put together. But ultimately, like, it was a pretty solid game from the Cardinals. Like, Trey McBride is awesome with 12 catches for 96 yards. And I think the point with the Vikings defense that we have seen, because what was it for their kicker today? He had Ryland. He had 6 field goal attempts, 5 made. So the Vikings defense, in my mind, and a lot of people have said this, not just about their defense, but defenses in general, it's like a bend but don't break, where like opposing teams will pick up yards as the Cardinals did today, but once they get to the red zone, that's when they tighten things up. That's when they actually shut you down. So that's ultimately good from the Vikings defense. But when they play caliber of offense like the Lions or the Eagles, that may not be the case. So I think it's good that the Vikings have this bend but don't break mentality, but they actually need to start improving that and stop them from even getting into the red zone to begin with. But I do think it is a good step for the Vikings today.
Yeah, I would say that. Let's hop conferences here for a minute. Talk about the team that we had tickets on and some decently high hopes. I mean, I don't want to speak for you. I had high hopes. I was all over the Texans, and you had a ticket for the Texans. They get the victory today, 23-20. Scary sight for Trevor Lawrence there, but he did take to Twitter or X, however you guys prefer to address it, saying that, he's good He's home. He's resting. He appreciates everybody's prayers and thoughts, which thankfully. But what did you see in this matchup? You got Stroud 242 in the air, 101 on the ground for Mixon, which is no surprise there because I'm pretty sure you called it a couple weeks ago and said from here on out, if Mixon is involved, he's going to be the key guy to help them collect those W's. Nico Collins, though, 119 in the air. So a nice balanced attack here for the Texans to overcome the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, this is I want to say congrats to the Texans for winning, but it wasn't good. Like, we're starting off a half where you're putting up 6 points against what is just objectively one of the worst teams, one of the worst defenses in the league. And then their defense kind of fell apart late in the game when Mac Jones was the quarterback. So Mixon had a big game. Dalton Schultz got his first touchdown of the season. Nico Collins, like you said, had over 100 yards. Like, it's good for the Texans. I think they'll win the division. I think they'll make the playoffs, but there's not much more past it. Like, we can look to them for some value because their defense is kind of bad. They're not covering games, but they can still score. So it makes them fun, but they're missing a piece. And maybe they don't have that experience. Maybe it's injuries, whatever it might be. They're missing a piece on defense.
Yeah, there is a disconnect there. And I thought that things were going to collectively come together a bit bigger. I mean, I thought they got the right veteran presence for a young team, but I guess that was a little bit too much of an expectation, and maybe some injuries fell into the lineup as well. I do have to ask you, Tom, what was probably your favorite game of the day? Because it's one of those weird weekends where so many games were played Thursday, the one on Friday. So what did you make?
I already have the answer. And we spoke about this game. It's the Seahawks. And I said this when we did the recap on Monday night. I said, what are we talking about the Seahawks? I said, it's the Seahawks on the spread. It's the Seahawks on the money line. It's every which way for the Seahawks. And the line was -1.5 for the Seahawks on Monday when we spoke. This morning, it was at +1.5. It moved all the way against the Seahawks in favor of the Jets. And I was on the Seahawks at -1.5. I was on the Seahawks money line. I was on the Seahawks +1.5. And I said this was a huge game for the Seahawks because there was a chance that the Cardinals lose on the road to the Vikings. And I said this was a Geno Smith revenge game. And he tweeted after game, and it was the Seahawks every which way. It was a great Seahawks game, and the Jets are dead.
I was trying to pick the perfect moment to give you the platform to re-announce that one because it was in my head as I was seeing the score go down, as I was seeing the tweets of Jets fans. I'm so sorry, Jets fans, the heartbreak. Don't go anywhere. Stick with Tom Vecchio and myself here on Pro Football Today, the post-game show on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With two former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
absolutely fillet Indiana. They would smash them.
What?
Honestly,
Do you listen to yourself speak? That's not a reality question. They have not played each other. You are using hypothetical.
And they got embarrassed.
As so many
if
teams
they would have
do.
won that football, yes, that's you're
but that's the thing, Johnny.
correct.
No. Stop.
The only argument is Indiana is a decent football team and a product of their environment.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Pro football. Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid TV. And before we went to the break, we were giving some credibility to the fact that a week ago, Tom Vecchio told you all it was going to be Seahawks all the way. Spread, money line, wherever you can grab it, it's going to be all Seahawks in a revenge game for Geno Smith. So many people also tweeting, like, love this for Geno Smith. Congratulations to Geno Smith. Well, whatever. 206 through the air, Walker 49 on the ground. But then it's Rodgers under 200 passing yards. The 26-21 victory for the Seahawks, I feel like, spoke volumes. Tom, I know we don't want to go against Jets fans too much. They're already feeling so much despair. But heading into this, you picked up the 1.5 spread. What did you make of what you analyzed was going to happen and what played out in this 26-21 beating Seahawks over the Jets?
It certainly started off a bit slow with the Seahawks being down. I think it was 21 or 14-0 at one point. I'm not sure if it was 21-0 on another point, but their defense showed up when they needed to. Obviously, the pick six was huge. There's just a clear disconnect on the offense for the Jets. And this is not to say that the Seahawks are some amazing team and everything was smooth sailing for them in this game, because it clearly wasn't. They obviously had their issues on offense. And when we're seeing just one passing touchdown from Geno Smith, and we're not seeing DK Metcalf play a huge role, and ultimately Kenneth Walker 16 of 49 on the ground is it's modest if we're being honest about it. But their defense showed up when they needed to. They made key third down conversions. Granted, there were a ton of penalties on the Jets side of things. So I think one takeaway I may have is that no matter who's playing the Jets, that team is still always live to win, just because there's so much internal dysfunction. There's so many penalties going against the Jets that your bet will always be alive.
Yeah, that's such a tough thing to think of. But who would have thought the Jets were going to win less than a handful of games this season? There's not too much more to say about that. Something that we can positively speak better on, I will say, is pivoting to another game, Steelers, Bengals. Who had the Steelers picking up 44 points today by any means? 414 passing yards for Russell Wilson. Will we ever see this again in his career? Because that blew my mind that's what it took to overcome the Bengals. Their defense, who knows what was going on there. What'd you see that I didn't pick up on, Tom? Because this was a wild one.
I mean, this has kind of been the story for the Bengals all season. How many times have we said this at this point? Joe Burrow throws for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you tell me a starting quarterback is throwing for 309 yards, only 1 interception, and 3 touchdowns, I'd be wow, that team probably did pretty well. They also had a rushing touchdown on the ground. And surprise, surprise, the Bengals defense is terrible, as we've said week in and week out. And what I've said about Joe Burrow, what's the best prop for Joe Burrow, if you remember?
Oh, was it his attempts or completions? Please tell me.
Attempts.
Thank you. Okay.
Over 36.5 was the line today. He ended with 38 because when push comes to shove, they can't run the ball that great. It's they're okay on the ground, Chase Brown, but Burrow is just going to have the ball in his hands because their defense is terrible and they're playing from behind. And credit to Russell Wilson for 414 yards, like you said, in 3 touchdowns. The Steelers picked up a huge win. They were +3. That line should not have been +3. It was Steelers +3. I think that was a great spot to take them, which I did. And couple that with the Ravens' loss. This was a huge weekend for Dave Sharapan. It's Pittsburgh behind him. We will hear it tomorrow night. But it was a great win for the Steelers. Great for their division. If you have a division, take it on the Steelers. I think you're in a great spot.
Oh, yeah. Dave's going to be raving because not only does he get this big Steelers win, the 44 points is still just blowing my mind. But then Penn State, I had to give him a shout-out yesterday, unfortunately, because Penn State just stresses me out. But they figured it out a little bit. They're probably fine in playoffs, whatever. So Sharapan's going to be so high on Pittsburgh behind him tomorrow. What does this win mean, though, with the Ravens losing and this group moving forward, you think?
It's good for the Steelers, but like I'm not taking them over the Bills. I'm not taking them over the Chiefs. If they when they play the Ravens again, like I think the Ravens will be the right side. I think the Ravens are the better team, but actually showing up and like putting all the pieces together in a game against Mike Tomlin is a tough thing to do. So maybe they beat the Ravens, but you give me the Steelers versus the Bills or the Steelers versus the Chiefs, I'm taking the Chiefs or the Bills 100 times out of 100 ahead of the Steelers.
Yeah, there's been some slip-ups defensively, too, for the Steelers. I mean, at least for their defense. You usually see them have, like, a much more commanding presence out there. A number of narrow escapes for some teams here. One of the other ones that I want to get to before we probably look ahead a little bit, Chargers, 17-13 over the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons were a team that in the beginning of the year we were like, maybe let's not get ahead of ourselves. They might be better, but they might not be great. Then they started piecing together some pretty spectacular football. And then for some reason, I feel like that fizzled out, or maybe I just kind of stopped paying attention. But Chargers coming out on top here, not a big passing performance by Herbert. Honestly, just kind of sludging through here. But McConkey, 117, is this the guy to go to when it comes to props and looking at the Chargers?
It has to be. Especially with J.K. Dobbins being placed on IR, where we expected Gus Edwards to be the main guy in the backfield for the Chargers, but they didn't do much of anything on the ground today with Kamani Vidal getting involved. Hassan Haskins even got a catch. And it has to be Ladd McConkey time and time again. Maybe we go to Will Dissly at times if it's a matchup thing. But I think Herbert going to McConkey will be the answer, especially receptions if they get too early and often. When it comes to the Falcons, like you said, they fizzled out. They started off up and down. Then they won 3 in a row. They lost. They won 2 in a row. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They play at Minnesota next week. Very tough matchup. But they end their season with the Raiders, the Giants, the Commanders, and the Cardinals. They can pick up 3 wins there. So their season's not over. And this is like the Falcons are just a yo-yo this year where they start a little bit low, then they won 3 in a row, and now they're in a little bit of a lull. But they can end their season on a high note with, I'm going to say, 3 out of 4 wins. Maybe not the Commanders, but the Raiders, the Giants, and the Panthers, they can win those games. So if you have a Falcons like to make the playoffs ticket, I think you're still alive. It's not easy, and it's not like comfortable to have, but I think they can be okay, but definitely not great.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that because there's something else you and I talk about quite often for these post-game shows, looking at the statistics, what the numbers tell us versus what the result tells us. I mean, 245 through the air for Cousins, not bad, obviously. 4 interceptions, disgusting. But you got Robinson on the ground, too. And then through the air, you got 95. So, I mean, you see some of the progress that their offense was able to make. Turnovers are going to hand your game over to your opponent regardless. So I wouldn't veer away from them being able to see the postseason. Anyone who has tickets on that one, I completely agree. A couple more games since it was a lighter slate when it comes to the NFL with all the excitement. So make sure you continue to hang with Tom and I here for Pro Football Today, the post-game show here on SportsGrid TV.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. with 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Fillet Indiana. They would smash them. Honestly,
you listen to yourself speak. That's not a reality question. They have not played each other. You are using hypothetical.
And they got embarrassed.
As so many
if
teams
they would have
do.
Run that football yes, that's you're
but that's the thing, guys. No.
The
Stop.
only argument is Indiana is a decent football team and a product of their environment.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
One more rally with Pro Football today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson, Vecchio, now running through the Sunday slate after the Bills take a W over the Niners tonight. Tom, I don't want to be that person. We've talked about a number of these games. We only had so many games to talk about because we actually got on Thanksgiving. So, of course, I've got to ask. And maybe you share the story about the excitement of the Bucs. I mean, no, was it the hottest win? Absolutely not. Overtime, they got the job done, 26-23. Baker Mayfield, 235 in the air. Bucky Irving just being the hero. You call Josh Allen a hero. Well, Bucky Irving is our hero. I guess Tampa's hero. I can't say our that much anymore. 152 on the ground. And then Mike Evans, 118 in the air through 8 receptions. You know that he is one of the ultimate heroes. And they're going to do everything possible to get him 1,000 yards, but that's going to be a tough one after some time missed. So what do we see in this one?
What we saw in this one is, I would say, speaking frankly from the Panthers side of things, they have looked better. They started off the year terrible, losing by 20, 30 points, whatever it was. They covered last week against the Chiefs. They go into overtime. They covered today. Like, they are looking better. And credit to them and Dave Canales. Like, they are putting together a competent team, not like the disaster they had. So full credit to them for doing that. The Bucs, I've been talking about Bucky Irving since like week 2. And he's finally being like the featured back, which I think he should be. And then Mike Evans. I tweeted about Mike Evans today. I talked about Mike Evans on the 12 p.m. show and the halftime show, saying it was a Mike Evans game and they want to get him to 1,000 yards. And next week, they play the Raiders. And I'm going to be saying the exact same things about Mike Evans, whatever his line is at. I assume it's going to be in the upper 60s. And it's going to be Mike Evans over 68 yards or whatever it's going to be. It was 64 today. And then Mike Evans, 70 plus, 80 plus, 90 plus. Coming into today, he had 403 receiving yards. He needs to average 99.5 receiving yards to get to 1,000 in the final 6 games of the season. He had 117, like you said today. 117, 118, whatever it was today. 118 to be exact. So that average change, it's going to be a little bit lower. It's a Mike Evans end of the season because, A, the Bucs still need to win games, and he's their best player overall. So good stuff. Baker did get a little bit banged up. Would like to get some clarification on that with his ankle. He had to leave the game. Kyle Trask came in, but I think he'll be okay. It is the Baker, Bucky. I wish Mike Evans had a B in his name, but we could go some alliteration, but it's not. But we'll go with Big Mike. So Baker, Bucky, and Big Mike Evans.
There you go. They actually have called him Big Mike because of his whole football/basketball era, or, overlapping era and stuff like that. Big basketball guy. And we see the skills in the end zone sometimes. So, I'll never root against Mike Evans. He's the hero for the Bucs. And Bucky Irving, you called that weeks ago. I don't know if we're going to pinpoint any heroes in this, but as we get ready to wrap up the post-game show, we got to look ahead to what's going to be the pregame party tomorrow. As a reminder, Tom Vecchio, myself, Dave Sharapin, Adam Kaufman rejoining us on Pro Football Today, the pregame show, getting you ready for the Browns versus the Broncos. 5.5 on the spread, 42.5 on the total. Do we have a lot of angles on this one? Because I know last time that we had with the Broncos, you were really good at calling your player, and it took him some time to get going, but he definitely showed up for sense. The Browns, though, I mean, it's the Winston show right now. So what's your preliminary on this before we give it the full rundown tomorrow on Pro Football Today? Right. So, at this point in the season, we'd be looking at a matchup with like the Broncos, a playoff-bound team essentially, versus the Browns, who are not. And, what kind of game would we be getting in prime time? People would say like maybe a bit of a dud, but I don't think so. Bo Nix started off the season a little bit slow. He's been great in recent weeks, like really putting it together. The offense is moving, and the Browns are out of it. We can all agree with that, but like Jameis Winston is fun.
And we saw that last week against the Steelers, right? So it's like, at least we have like some level of excitement with the Browns. And we actually have a team on the other side that's still trying to win with a rookie quarterback. He's looking great, all these things. So tomorrow is a Cortland Sutton game. Get on board. Oh. He's going for big yards. I'll talk about him in depth on the pregame show. We'll go through the different props that I like. Obviously, he'll be in the SGP, whatever it might be. But this is going to be a Cortland Sutton themed game. It is also Jerry Jeudy going up against his former team that traded him away to the Browns back in March. So there's a little bit of revenge factor. So despite a clear playoff team versus a non-playoff team, I actually think we're in for an awesome game tomorrow.
And then I know we'll unpack it further tomorrow, but you've got Winston, who, yes, is having fun, will have some fun tomorrow, has the tendency to turn over the ball. And then you got a Broncos defense that I think we've talked about being surprisingly credit for, right?
Mm-hmm. We're in for a good one.
We're in for a good one. Make sure you hang out with Tom Vecchio and myself, Dave Sherapan, as well as Adam Kaufman tomorrow. Pro Football Today, the pregame show on SportsGrid TV, running through this matchup, Broncos-Browns. But for the most part, I hope everybody enjoyed their Sunday and their Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a safe and wonderful weekend. Make sure you follow SportsGrid over at SportsGrid. And until tomorrow, everyone, that's it for Tom Vecchio.